For the sake of this, I will give you an example of where Roosevelt does actually take some pretty strict action because of companies that don't take action on their own. So Roosevelt most definitely is going to use that kind of common sense approach, and he's going to try and balance the needs of competing groups using that kind of common sense square deal mindset. But what he needs to kind of make sense and make sure that what he's doing is protecting society in a way that's appropriate but not crushing business. So here we have, for example, the meatpacking industry. Now, I don't even know if you understand kind of what meatpacking is and how that process happens, but all across the Midwest and all across the South are huge cattle ranches, and most of the cattle end up in large urban areas where they're slaughtered or right outside large urban areas. At the time, one of the largest areas in the world for producing beef in these meat processing plants was Chicago, Illinois. It was a rail hub, so you could bring in beef from the Midwest, from the Great Plains, from the Rockies, from the South. You could bring meat in all in the place in Chicago. It was cold there in the winter, so it saved on refrigeration costs. You process the beef there, you slaughter the animal, you make your sausage, your scrapple, whatever, and you send it on your way. A muckraker named Upton St. Clair had discovered that these meat processing plants, which used mainly immigrant labor, by the way, were horrific. And we're going to do an activity in class to talk about this, but I'm talking like your fingernails falling off, like by the time you're done, like your thumb is like just like a bloody stump, and there's nothing left to it, and you're bleeding and everything, and there's tuberculosis germs everywhere, and mold and feces. It's disgusting. And Upton St. Clair gets in there, and he sees that these immigrants are working in these incredibly intolerable conditions. And so he writes this book called The Jungle. And the book itself is actually supposed to be more about how immigrants have a terrible experience living in these urban areas and these tenements, and how terrible their employers are. But what people really pick up on is just how disgusting the meat industry is and how completely unregulated it is, and what these businesses will do to save a buck. So Sinclair, he uses his writing to focus on these problems. And the goal here, right, remember, since he's a muckraker, the goal is to expose those problems so that government can then do something, right? So expose the problems, inspire change, government does something. That something, in the case of Teddy Roosevelt, was to let the meat processing plants know that they had to make changes. And when they didn't, he got, through Congress, the Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act. And that is the foundation under which all of our food safety laws since have been rested on. That's the bedrock. And it starts in the early 1900s because of a muckraker. And because government gave the business the opportunity to fix itself, it didn't. So then government put its foot down and said, this is how you're going to run the show. So I think that's a great example of kind of common sense square deal politics, where your society can't be productive if it's falling over dead because you're giving it tainted, rotten, spoiled meat. I think the answer here so far is yeah. I mean, government can't fix problems, at least under Teddy Roosevelt, as long as he maintains this kind of common sense square deal approach.